This story takes place about 10 years ago on a day just like any other. I went to a pretty big and old high school. I was in English class, and I think that it was towards the end of the school day. We had a normal class period, and we had like 5 minutes left. That's when our teacher, Miss Williams, got up and told the class that we were now under a lockdown. She went and locked the door and then came back. Of course, everybody was curious as to what it was for. Somebody asked her, but she said that she didn't know. The class was pretty big, maybe like 30 to 40 students, and I sat at the far back of the class. We all sat there at our desks for a while. Nobody was allowed to leave or anything, and we basically just had to sit there and wait. But I wasn't too nervous. I remember that we had a lockdown a few months before this one, and it turned out to be almost nothing. I think a business was robbed like 3 miles away, and they locked down all the schools in the area just as a precaution. In this situation, our teacher didn't seem too worried, and most of the students didn't either. We all wanted to know what the lockdown was for, but I think we all assumed it wasn't anything too serious. Nobody was asked to go under the desks or to the back of the classroom or anything like that. It was just like study hall for the most part during the lockdown. We all just talked or played games on our phones and things like that. It went on and on for about an hour. By that time, I was getting pretty bored. I was talking to my friend Adam and some other kids in the class that were my friends. At one point, I mentioned how I wanted to just get out and see what the lockdown was for, or even just leave the school. It was approaching the time that school would end, and I didn't want to be stuck in school all day. In our classroom, there were these doors in the back. They were not very noticeable and rarely used. They went to a little storage hallway, and I simply got up and walked over and opened it. At first, I was just kind of joking around with Adam that I was going to leave, but I noticed that Miss Williams was sitting at her computer and looking at it, and not really paying much attention to the class. It would be really easy for me to leave without being seen, so I decided to just do it. When I got into the small dark hallway, I closed the door back up, and I saw a bunch of old junk that was in storage. I walked down the hall to where I knew it opened up into one of the main hallways of the school. When I got outside of there, I could see that it was pretty much empty in the halls. It pretty much just looked like any time there was class going on and you would walk out. My plan was to just leave the school and then go home. It was almost 2:30 p.m. and school was supposed to get out at 2:50. I walked down the hallways towards the staircase that led to the exit, and I was careful to be quiet and look out so that nobody else would see me. When I got to the staircase, I walked down it, but when I got to the main level of the school, I heard someone's voice, like maybe a teacher. I couldn't see them, but they sounded like they were right around the corner. I couldn't risk walking past them to try to leave, so I kept going down the stairs to wait it out. The stairs kept going and led to the basement. The basement was at the lowest level of the school, and they had some old classrooms down there. Those classrooms are no longer used though, and the entire basement was used pretty much as just storage. It wasn't really that big either. It only had maybe 8 rooms in it. When I went down there, I realized how dark it was. I didn't intend on staying down there long at all. I went down to the base of the stairs and was waiting for whoever was up top to leave the stairs. But then I heard some voices from upstairs getting closer, like they might come down. So I went deeper into the basement and then couldn't see much because of how dark it was. When I got a ways down into the basement hallway, I heard another noise. This one, though, was coming from the basement behind me. It sounded like somebody walking closer to my direction. I sensed them getting closer and closer, and I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't think anybody was supposed to be down there. I thought about turning around and looking, but I decided not to. Instead, I just ran as fast as I could back up the staircase and went up the stairs to the first floor. I ran out into the main hallway where I had heard the voices before. There, I saw several police officers and some other teachers. They looked really surprised to see me. I figured that I would get in trouble and be sent to the principal's office, but they all started asking me if I was okay. I told them that there was someone else in the basement, and then they told me that's where they thought the suspect was. They ended up going down there eventually, and I was taken back to my class until the lockdown ended about 30 minutes later. Some guy had snuck into the school, and when he was spotted, he ran away, and we ended up going into a lockdown, but nobody could seem to find the guy after that. He had gone down into the basement when I went down there, and looking back at that, I'm really glad that I ran away when I did. This happened about 6 years ago. I was in high school and was a junior at the time. It was the spring semester, and I remember that the junior locker commons were near the east exit of the school. I don't remember exactly what day of the week it was, but I do know that I was in my class that had study hall in it. This is where we just had some free time to do homework and stuff like that. As soon as it started, I asked my teacher if I could get my math book from my locker, and he said yes. Now, I had a long walk to get to my locker because my class was on the complete opposite side of the school, and it took about 5 minutes to get there. I had some homework that I really wanted to get done, so I walked quickly because study hall only lasted about 30 minutes. I got to my locker, and literally as soon as it opened, I heard a noise come over the school speakers. Somebody started talking, and I really couldn't hear the announcement because the audio wasn't that great. It sounded like when you're talking on the phone to someone and they have their mouth too close to the phone, but I thought I heard the words lockdown somewhere in what they were saying. I assumed it was a drill because the voice didn't seem too panicked or anything like that, and I wasn't seeing anything weird like a suspicious person in the hall or anything. I got my book out of my locker and then took a few steps away from it to get to my classroom. But around the corner, where some of the science classrooms were, I heard a teacher yell something at a kid about being in the hallway. It seemed like a kid got in trouble for being out in the hallway, and I didn't want to get in trouble either, even though I was just going back to my class. I thought maybe I could just wait out the drill, which might last 5 or 10 minutes, and then go back to my class. At this point, there was nobody in the hallways at all, and where the locker commons were, it was like a maze of lockers everywhere, and you could hide pretty easily. I stayed where I was and then sat on the ground. I wasn't hearing any footsteps or anything like that for a while. I went on my phone and started playing some games on it. Time went by, and when 15 minutes had passed and I hadn't heard anything saying the drill was over, I started to get worried. Maybe it wasn't a drill. I thought about getting up and going back, but I felt like I was in too deep now. I stayed there thinking of what I should do. Then I heard the sound of a locker quietly opening a few rows over. I didn't know anybody else had been over here. I heard footsteps coming closer to me, and I figured it was a student, so I went over to meet him. Maybe it was one of my friends. When I got over and we were both inside of each other, I saw that it was a student, but I didn't recognize him. He looked to be about my age, and even though I didn't know him, I was glad that somebody else was back here with me, and it made me feel a little bit better. We said hi to each other, and the kid told me that his name was Daniel. I asked him if the lockdown was a drill or what, and he told me that it wasn't a drill. This confirmed what I was already worried about. Daniel said that he didn't know what the reason for the lockdown was exactly, but he just knew that it wasn't a drill, and so he was hiding in the locker commons. He also didn't want to go back to his class and just wanted to wait it out. We sat there and talked for several minutes about our classes and basic stuff. Then he asked me if Mr. Stevens still taught class in room 108. I told him that I really didn't know. Then Daniel suddenly got sort of agitated. He asked me how on earth I didn't know that. I had a bad feeling about this now, and I asked Daniel why he was getting so mad. He turned and looked at me with lots of anger in his face. My bad feeling was now getting worse. I just wanted to go back to my class now. I told him, "My bad, I think I'm just gonna go back to my class, man." He told me not to, but my mind was already made up. I took a few steps away, and then Daniel stood up. When he did, I turned and ran away, sprinting out of the locker commons and into the main hallway. I heard Daniel starting to run after me, and it caused me to go even faster than I already was. I made it out of the main hallways to the cafeteria, which was about the halfway point to my classroom. When I got there, I saw one of the gym teachers. He was standing outside one of the doors leading to the gyms, and I ran over to him, and when he saw me, I felt much better. I asked him if I could get inside, and he looked confused but let me in, probably because I had had him for one of my classes before. He asked me what I was doing, and I tried my best to explain the situation. We were under a lockdown for about 10 more minutes after that, until I found out that sure enough, Daniel had been caught. He wasn't even a student at our school. He had been several years prior, but had dropped out. I guess he hated Mr. Stevens because he had failed him, and Daniel was now returning to get his revenge on him. When I met him, I believed 100% that he was a student, and it now makes it even more creepy when I look back at it. When I was in college, I competed on the track and field team. I had competed in high school as well, and had a good relationship with one of my coaches, which also happened to be the strength and conditioning coach at my high school. He really helped me improve a lot, and told me whenever I was back in town, I could work out at the high school weight room if there wasn't a class going on. After my first year of college, this is what I did. The weight room was open and had no class in it from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., and when I had come back when my freshman year at college had ended, the high school still had almost a whole month left. The first week, I worked out every day at 10 a.m. in the weight room. It was great because I had it entirely to myself, and I didn't have to pay for a gym membership either. During my second week of working out there, I got inside the weight room and was about 10 minutes into my workout when I heard over the school intercom that we were going under a lockdown. I wasn't really sure what to do in this situation. Nobody was supposed to leave or enter the building, but I wasn't a student here, and I wasn't even sure how many people knew that I was there. I decided to just continue lifting. The doors were shut, and I was all by myself and figured it wouldn't really be anything too serious. I kept going for maybe 20 minutes or so. Everything was silent except for the sounds of weights I was using, but I tried to be more quiet. Then I started to hear noises as if somebody was approaching the door. I stopped what I was doing and looked over to it. Where I was at the opposite end of the weight room, which didn't have the greatest of lighting and lots of machines and weights in the way, so I didn't have a really good angle at the doorway. I moved over to look around one of the machines, and I saw the door open and somebody walk in. It wasn't a coach or a student, though. It was just some guy in a sweatshirt that I didn't recognize. He didn't see me, and he walked straight for the other end of the weight room. I knew he wasn't a student, and I didn't really think he was a teacher either, so I got a really bad feeling, and I slowly backed away to the corner of the room, and I hid behind another machine. The guy walked around the other end for a bit, and then I heard him walking closer to the end of the weight room that I was at. The only thing going through my head was that this was some kind of criminal, and he had broken into the school, and who knows what he's capable of. I stayed hiding back there. There was an emergency exit door in the back of the weight room, only about 50 feet away from where I was. I really wanted to go outside. I thought that might cause the fire alarm to go off, but I wasn't entirely sure. Unfortunately, I heard the guy walking closer and in the direction of the door. I thought for a moment the guy was going to leave, and it made me feel better. But then he walked right past the door towards me. I really couldn't see much and was trying my hardest not to move a muscle. All I could do was listen. I heard him walking closer, step by step. He was about 15 feet in front of me when he got to the same area of the weight room as me. I felt like I could make it if I made a run for it, so I took a deep breath and then got out from behind the machine that I was behind and ran for the door. The man started to turn around, but I looked away and focused straight on the door. When I got there, I shoved it open, and I heard the fire alarm start to sound. I ran outside and around the building. I ran all the way until I got to my car. I felt much safer in there, and I called my coach after that. He taught a class that hour in another classroom that was nearby to that. It turned out that the guy who was in the weight room with me ended up escaping when I went out the exit, and he had been seen suspiciously walking around inside the school before that. I'm not sure who he was or if he would have hurt me, but luckily, he was found about a mile away from the school a short time later.